Hi folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny nerdy things. And I know I'm about 4 years late to the party on this one, but YouTube recommended I watch the trailer for the upcoming Killer Bean game, and being a reasonable person, I thought, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm looking for. Now, if you're anything like me, then that's a bummer and I'm sorry to hear it. I hope things get better for you soon. But also, you're probably relatively unaware of who or what Killer Bean is. If that's the case, then watch where you're stepping, because I'm about to drop some knowledge. Killer Bean is essentially an anthropomorphic coffee bean assassin similar to John Wick, but you know, he's a coffee bean and this predates John Wick by almost a full decade. Also, instead of gangsters killing his dog, they play music too loud, so he goes on a murderous rampage into the beanie underbelly of Beantown. This all takes place in a full-length film called Killer Bean Forever, which is truly a cinematic masterpiece that you really ought to go watch if you haven't seen it yet. Without spoiling too much, the final confrontation is between our titular Killer Bean and the martial arts master Jet Bean. Of course, there's a fair few other notable characters tossed into the mix, but I think you get the gist of what's going on and what I'm going for here today with these two oversized clay coffee beans. The brown bean is Killer Bean, which of course makes the yellow bean Jet Bean. Now, both Killer Bean and Jet Bean are of equal size, so I've been sure to make both models at the same time, thus removing any chance of errors in scale when it comes time to build up their respective details. Otherwise, once I've got a pair of eyes and appropriately sized bean lips in place, that's both naked bean bodies built, so it's time to start adding their outfits. Killer Bean wears a very stylish red and black leather looking suit reminiscent of Deadpool, so I'm going to use a thinnish sheet of red clay that I'll wrap around the length of his body. I'll then mark the center point so I can score the front and cut the edges to size. However, once I got his suit cut to the correct shape, I realized that if I wanted him standing in a fighting stance, I'm going to need to rotate his suit since his body moves independent of the clothing on top. So I'll fill in these sections that I just cut out and realign where the center of the suit sits so his body is slightly turned inside. Then I can mark out where his arms will go, remove the clay, and begin to carve the rest of the detail on top. A lot of these sections are going to be black, but rather than make these parts out of black clay, it's easier just to carve the detail in than paint them later on. Once the underlying section of the suit is finished, I can roast my bean in the oven and add the shoulder straps that wrap around the body and connect in the back, and I'll blend this into the existing detail to create a nice uniform layer. Then I'll add the last few buckles and straps before drilling a couple holes in his underside to attach some lengths of wire for his legs. Once I've bent the wires into an appropriately wide, ready-to-throw fists pose, I can begin to wrap the wire in black clay. Now, one of the important things to remember about the world of Killer Bean is that while all the characters wear pants, they always seem to end at the top of the leg, leaving the underside exposed. I don't know if this is due to limitations in the software used to animate Killer Bean Forever, like since maybe all the bodies use ragdoll physics, the legs would go wonky if they had a full-length leggings, or if it's just an entirely artistic choice. Regardless, I'm a pretty big fan. Killer Bean's sporting a pair of equally fashionable red sneakers that match the rest of his outfit, so I'll make those out of some little balls of red clay that I'll smoosh into sneaker-shaped sausages and stick onto the bottoms of his legs. I'll then build up the clay around the legs before adding all the necessary shoe-like detail. Once my beans have been baked again, to fix the shoes in place, I can drill a couple holes in the pre-cut armholes that each get their own little armature wire wrapped in black clay. Much like the legs, these are little black sausages that don't directly attach to anything back on the body, which makes me wonder if these aren't sleeves and pant legs, but instead these are just the color of Killer Bean's limbs. To make his little fighting fists, I'll smoosh a little ball of red clay into a roughly hand-like shape, then mark out 3 sausage fingers, refine the shape, and smoosh it onto his arm nubs. I'll then wrap the fingers around until I've got a pair of little fists that I can fix up a little bit by bulking them out and smoothing them in. Otherwise, that's Killer Bean done, so it's time to gussy up the bad guy. Jet Bean wears a full-body black silk tang suit, so I'll wrap him up in an appropriately silky black sheet. Also, despite what I said before about the beans showing their butts, Jet Bean seems to be one of the only characters whose pants actually cover his butt, which is probably some sort of social commentary on the imbalance of power in a world of assless chaps. Otherwise, I'll refine the shape of his shirt, then gently press the collar down so it's a little less starchy looking before adding some armholes. Then of course he gets his own leg wires, onto which I will add some little balls of white clay that will be his socks, which I can then wrap the legs in some black clay, building up the base around the socks until he's got some stylish rounded bell bottoms. Some final little cuffs around the socks, and I can get to work making his shoes, which are basically just little black slippers into which he slips his little socked nubs. Same as before, I'll fit a couple lengths of wire into some pre-drilled armholes, then bend them into the correct pose and cover them in a layer of black clay, complete with a couple little black hands at the ends. The difference here is that Deadbean has bullet blocking bracers that cover his forearms. I'll then wrap an extra long, extra flat flatworm of clay around his waist and blend that into the body to make the flared bottom of his Tang suit. Finally, I can add some little golden wormy clasps to keep his suit closed before adding a bunch of black clay to the top of his head to make his hair. Once I've refined the shape and left a bunch of black clay stains that I'll inevitably have to fix later, I'll give the hair a bit of hair texturing before rolling out an extra long wormy dealy and looping it back on itself to create his braid. I'll add a couple clasps at the top and bottom before pressing this into place at the bottom of his hair. And with that, Deadbean is finished as well, and I can set my two perfectly equally sized beans in front of each other and admire how uniform in scale they are. Apparently at some point I done goofed, and now Deadbean is significantly taller as a result of standing more upright and having a lot more padding around his midsection. So really I've got two options. I can remake Deadbean so he's closer in size to Killer Bean, or, and hear me out, I can Photoshop it so they both look the same size, and I can make the thumbnail for this video in such a way that you can't tell until you're committed and it's too late to back out. There. Perfect. Now I've got two equally sized beans ready for a coat of paint. I'll start by going over all of Killer Bean's reds with a deeper red wash to add some highlighting and recess shading, followed by a lighter red around the edges for edge highlighting, I guess. Then the little section on his back will get a metallic red finish, and I'll clean up any of the sections of his skin that I stained during the sculpting by repainting it all with a deep brown wash. I'll then take a little time to paint black all the sections of his outfit that are supposed to be black, as well as add whatever little details I missed along the way. While I've got the black on my brush, I'll repaint his arms and legs to get any of the overpainting from the red wash, and I can give all these sections a bit of shading by adding some dark grays for contrast. Finally, some final touches with a bit of gold here and there, and it's time to give Deadbean a quick touch up as well, starting with a yellow to hide all the black stains on his face, followed by black everywhere else to cover the yellow stains that arose as a result of overpainting with the yellow. Some more dark gray highlighting for a bit of variation and edge highlighting, and I can give the golden clasps a nice golden finish and the bulletproof bracers a nice gunmetal gray. For the eyes, I'll use some isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab to remove whatever layers of paint have built up while painting each bean's face, before giving Killer Bean some big green peepers and Deadbean some big brown ones. Finally, a quick coat of UV resin will give them that ever-important shine, and that's my beans finished, so it's time to make a base. No, wait, before I do that, I forgot to make Killer Bean's dual pistol holster, which I'll make by wrapping a thin sheet of black clay over a little wooden stick and cutting it to the correct shape. Clay doesn't really stick to wood, so I can make the holsters on the wood and bake it in the oven, then they can pop off easily enough and a little glue will hold them in place. And with that, it's now time to make a base. Fortunately for me, the final fight scene takes place in a room that's basically just oversized concrete tiles with some tiny details scattered around the room. So all I really need to do to make this scene accurate is give the beans a tiled floor to stand on. So once I've cut my sheet of XPS foam to size and carved some tiles into it, I can add some cheap and cheerful texture by using this expensive, one-of-a-kind texture roller. To both protect and prime the foam, I'll mix up a batch of black paint and Mod Podge, then completely coat the surface. Once that's had ample time to dry, I'll add a couple dozen coats of gray until it's got a nice uniformly gray appearance, at which point I'll apply an extra heavy coat of very black wash, which then gets dabbed away, leaving me with a lovely dirty concrete look. A final dusting of lighter grays will bring back some of the sharper edges, and that's pretty much it. I can then pop my two combat beans in place, and that's us done, and onto the Glamour Shots. As always, a big old thank you to my lovely, lovely patrons, and a special hey how are you to my newest patrons, Time Ravager, Ben Reese Stash, Emmett and Morrissey, Maddie Sully, Finn McLaughlin, Lisa Danbrot, Hayden Stein, Lisa S, Rose, Cacrid, Small Honk, the person reading this is a king, Amanda Katora, The Best Dummy, Emily, Wit Weasel and Nick, and Dasher Dancer Prancer Vixen, Common Cupid, Donder and Blitzen, but not Rudolph the ungrateful bastard. You are the inexplicably bare-assed coffee bean with which this channel makes its morning brew. I hope you got at least a little entertainment out of this otherwise wonky video about making anthropomorphic murder beans, but if you didn't, then contact YouTube to request a refund. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.